my native place. Prior to the battle, it was comparatively unknown to the outside world. Today, Gettysburg is a changed place. Fondly do I cherish the scenes of my childhood. Often do I think of the lovely groves on Colts Hill, of the now famous Springler Spring where our merry peals of laughter mingled. I often stood in the quiet evergreen cemetery when we knew naught but the smiles of peace, gazing to the round tops. Little did I dream that from those summits, the engines of war would belch forth their missiles of destruction. Little did I think that those lovely valleys would soon be strewn with the distorted and mangled bodies of American brothers. Such is the transition which in my girlhood days I was made to realize. I am constrained to transmit my knowledge of the place now so historic, as well as my experience during those days of July 1863. Hi, my name is Makenah Voyles. I'm in 8th grade at the Pleasant View Baptist School in Makenah, Kentucky. One of my passions is learning about the Civil War. Today, I will be delivering a cutting from the book At Gettysburg, a touching first-person account written by Tilly Pierce, who was a young teenager when she personally experienced the Battle of Gettysburg. As we hear what a girl saw and heard of the battle, may we picture what a terrible war was fought, lives sacrificed, and burdens carried to preserve unity and freedom in our country. A little before noon on Tuesday, June 30th, a great number of Union cavalry started to arrive in the town. It was to me a novel and a grand sight. I had never seen so many soldiers at one time. A crowd of us girls were standing at the corner as these soldiers passed by. Desiring to encourage them, my sister began to sing the old war song, Our Union Forever. Their countenances brightened, and we received their thanks and cheers. The movements this day told plainly that some great military event was coming pretty close to us. As we laid down for the night, little did we think what the morrow would bring forth. We awoke early. It was impossible to become drowsy with the events of the previous day uppermost in our minds. We had no sooner finished breakfast when it was announced that troops were coming. First came a long line of cavalry, then wagon after wagon passed by for quite a while. It was between 9 and 10 o'clock when we first started noticing firing in the direction of Seminary Ridge. At first, the sound was faint. Then it grew louder. Soon the booming of cannon was heard. Then great clouds of smoke were seen rising. The sound became louder and louder and was now incessant. The troops passing us moved faster. The battle was raging. This was my first terrible experience. Our neighbor said she would leave the town and go to her father's, who lived on the eastern slope of the Round Top. She thought it safer for herself and children to go. She requested that I be permitted to accompany her, and since it was regarded a safer place, my parents readily consented that I should go. As we were passing along the cemetery hill, our men were already planting cannon. They told us to hurry as fast as possible, but we were in a great danger of being shot. I fairly ran to get out of this new danger. As I looked towards the Seminary Ridge, I could see and hear the confusion of battle, troops moving, smoke rising from the field, shells bursting in the air. It was not long after our arrival until Union artillery came hurrying by. It was indeed a thrilling sight, how the men spurred their horses, how the officers urged their men as they all flew past towards the sound of battle. Suddenly, we beheld an explosion. We see a man thrown high in the air and come down in a wheat field close by. He is picked up and carried into the house. How I pitied that poor man. How terrible the scenes of war were being irresistibly portrayed before my vision. I was not long in learning what I could do to help. Obtaining a bucket, I hastened to the spring and carried water, giving water to our tired soldiers till night came on. It was towards the close of the afternoon that some of the wounded from the field of battle began to arrive. They reported hard fighting, many wounded and killed. I more fully began to realize that something terrible had taken place. The wounded began to come in greater numbers, some limping, some crawling, others carried. Before night, the barn was filled with the shattered and dying heroes of this day's struggle. Others were still coming. A chaplain who was present stepped up to me and said, "Little girl, do all you can do for the poor soldiers. The Lord will reward you." The first day had passed. The next day, dawn bright and clear. As quickly as possible, I was out of the house and saw more troops hurrying towards town. Regiment after regiment continued to press forward. How often my thoughts were anxiously fixed on my dear ones at home. Were they alive? Did I still have a home? It was impossible in the present state of affairs to expect any hope of an answer. Towards the middle of the afternoon, heavy cannonading began on the two roundtops just back of the house. This was so terrible and severe that it was with great difficulty we could hear ourselves speak. It began so unexpectedly, so much so, we were all terror-stricken and hardly knew what to do. Some of the soldiers suggested that we had better go to a farmhouse about 1/2 mile across the fields, and acting on that advice, we ran as fast as possible. When we reached the farmhouse, we were permitted to remain but a few minutes, for hardly had we arrived when we were told to hurry back from where we had came from, that we were in a great deal more danger, so there was no alternative but to retrace our steps as fast as we came. Occasionally, a shell would come flying over Round Top and explode high in the heavens overhead. It seemed as though the heavens were sending forth peal upon peal of terrible thunder, while at the same time, the very earth beneath our feet trembled. The cannonading, which all the time seemed to get more and more severe, lasted until the close of the day. On this evening, the number of wounded brought was indeed appalling. How the orchard and the space around the buildings were covered with the shattered and dying heroes of this day's struggle. Others were still coming.
The scene had become terrible.
The scene had become terrible beyond description. The sun was high in the heavens when I awoke the next day. Already there was occasional musketry and cannonading in the direction of Gettysburg, and we expected greater danger than at any time before. Towards the middle of the afternoon, some of the soldiers said there would likely be hard fighting right around the house, and if we remained, we would be in the midst of flying bullets and shells. Carriages were in waiting out at the barn to take us off to a place of safety. When we arrived, we found the place full of people who had also fled their homes to get beyond the dangers. Towards the close of the afternoon, after all had become quiet, we started back. As we drove along in the cool of the evening, everywhere confusion prevailed. The whole country seemed filled with desolation. I fairly shrank back at the awful sight, crowded with wounded, dying and dead. The air was filled with moanings and groanings. So great was their suffering, such pictures. They are the most terrible that the battle presented to my mind. Twilight had now fallen, another day had closed, but at an awful sacrifice. The destruction, the suffering, the homes that never more would be cheered, the heartbroken widows, the innocent orphans, only those who have seen these things can ever realize what they mean. Who will dare say that with such sacrifices upon our country's altar, our national inheritance is not sacredly precious? What has been done and is still doing on the battlefield of Gettysburg shows how devoted is the heart of the American nation to the memory of those brave men who through their loyalty were willing to suffer and to lay down their lives in order that the precious institutions of our land might not perish. May the heart of this fair land be forever inclined unto wisdom, so that we may never fall into the folly of another war and be compelled to pay the fearful penalty that would be sure to follow.